I helped my veteran neighbor repair his fence. Then he said, "There's someone I want you to meet." The sound of splintering wood echoed across the quiet neighborhood just as the morning sun painted everything in warm gold. I looked up from my porch and saw my elderly neighbor standing beside a broken fence, one trembling hand resting against the weathered posts as though he was trying to hold years of memories together with nothing but determination. For a long moment, he didn't ask for help. He simply stared at the damage with tired eyes that had clearly seen far worse than fallen boards. Something about that silent struggle stopped me in my tracks. I had no idea that walking across my yard that morning would change not only his life but mine forever. And I certainly never expected that before the day was over, he would quietly look at me and say, "There's someone I want you to meet." Before we continue, if you believe kindness still has the power to change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Acts That Matter. Your support helps us continue bringing true-to-heart stories that remind the world goodness still exists. My name is Rowan Mercer, and I had lived on Birch Hollow Lane for just over 3 years. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone waved politely but mostly kept to themselves. The houses weren't fancy, but they carried history in every crack of paint and every old oak tree that lined the sidewalks. Life there moved slowly, and after years of chasing deadlines in the city, I welcomed the quiet. I worked remotely as a graphic designer, spending most of my days in front of a computer screen, speaking to clients I would probably never meet. Although I appreciated the peaceful routine, loneliness had quietly settled into my life after my father passed away. I kept busy, but some mornings the silence inside my house felt louder than anything outside. The man who lived next door was named Everett Sloan. Everyone knew he had served in the military decades earlier. A small American flag hung neatly from his porch every single day, and every Memorial Day he placed fresh flowers beneath a framed photograph that stood beside his front steps. He rarely talked about his service, and nobody pressed him. His movements were slow, his back slightly bent, yet every morning he swept his porch and watered the flowers with remarkable discipline. It was easy to admire him from a distance, but very few people actually knew him. That particular morning, strong winds during the night had knocked down nearly half of the wooden fence separating his backyard from an empty lot. Broken boards lay scattered across the grass like pieces of forgotten history. Everett stood quietly, studying the damage. He didn't look frustrated, he looked defeated. Without thinking much about it, I walked over and asked if he could use another pair of hands. He looked surprised, almost as if he had forgotten people still offered help without expecting something in return. After a brief hesitation, he nodded. The work wasn't easy. Many of the fence posts had rotted deep underground, forcing us to dig them out under the growing warmth of the morning sun. Sweat soaked through my shirt while Everett carefully sorted every board that could still be reused. Despite his age, he insisted on carrying his share. His hands were rough with old scars, moving with slow confidence that only comes from years of experience. Occasionally he smiled whenever a crooked board finally fit back into place. As we worked side by side, there weren't many words between us. Somehow the silence never felt awkward. Birds chirped overhead while the sound of hammers echoed gently through the neighborhood. Every once in a while, neighbors drove past and waved, surprised to see the old veteran laughing softly over something as simple as a stubborn nail refusing to cooperate. Hours passed before the fence finally stood upright again. It wasn't perfect. Some boards were newer than others, and a few leaned slightly, but together they formed something stronger than before. Everett wiped his forehead with an old handkerchief and stared at the finished fence for a long moment. There was pride in his eyes, but something else lingered beneath the surface. He thanked me quietly before saying the words that would stay with me forever. "There's someone I want you to meet." His voice carried an unusual weight. Curiosity mixed with concern as I followed him toward his front porch. Instead of inviting me inside his house, he walked slowly down the hallway until we reached a small room filled with sunlight. Every shelf held photographs, military medals, faded letters, and carefully folded flags. Time itself seemed to live inside those walls. In the center of the room sat a young woman in her 20s, gently arranging old photographs into albums. She looked up and smiled warmly. Her name was Mira Ellison. Everett introduced her as someone who visited every week to help organize decades of memories he could no longer sort alone. At first, I assumed she was simply a volunteer. Then Everett shared the truth. Years earlier, during one of the darkest periods after returning from military service, he had become deeply isolated. Haunted by memories he rarely spoke about, he pushed away friends, family, and nearly everyone who cared about him. One rainy evening, exhausted by loneliness, he had stopped beside a roadside diner. There he met a struggling single mother traveling with her little daughter after escaping an abusive relationship. They had almost nothing except an aging car and hope. Everett quietly paid for their meals without introducing himself. Before leaving, he handed the mother enough money to cover several nights at a motel. He never expected to see them again. That little girl was Mira. She had spent years searching for the man her mother called the stranger who reminded us that good people still exist. After her mother passed away from illness years later, Mira found an old receipt with Everett's first name written on the back. It became her mission to thank him. When she finally located him, she discovered he was living alone. So she stayed, not because she owed him anything. Because kindness deserved company. Listening to that story left me speechless. As weeks turned into months, the three of us developed an unexpected friendship. Every Saturday morning became our tradition. We shared breakfast, repaired little things around Everett's property, planted flowers, and listened as he slowly opened pieces of his life he had hidden for decades. He spoke about friends he lost overseas. He spoke about nights when sleep never came. He spoke about returning home feeling like a stranger in his own country. Most importantly, he spoke about guilt. He believed surviving when others didn't somehow made him less deserving of happiness. That burden followed him for years, quietly stealing moments he should have treasured. Watching him slowly heal reminded me of my own grief after losing my father. I realized pain often convinces people they must carry everything alone, when in reality healing almost always begins the moment someone simply chooses to stay beside them. One afternoon we visited the local Veterans Center together. Everett hadn't stepped inside in over 15 years. At first he hesitated outside the entrance, staring at the building with visible anxiety. I could almost see the invisible battle taking place inside him. Then Mira gently squeezed his shoulder. He took one slow step. Then another. Inside, dozens of veterans welcomed him like an old friend returning home. Some recognized him immediately, others simply smiled. For the first time since I had known him, Everett looked lighter. Almost peaceful. Over the following months he began volunteering there every Wednesday. He helped younger veterans navigate paperwork, shared practical advice, and quietly listened whenever someone needed understanding more than solutions. His greatest gift wasn't speaking. It was listening. People trusted him because they knew he truly understood. One crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after we repaired the fence, I noticed several cars parked outside Everett's house. Curious, I walked over. The backyard had transformed. Neighbors, veterans, local families, and children filled the garden with laughter. Long picnic tables stretched beneath colorful trees while homemade food covered every surface. At the center stood the very fence we had repaired together. Only now it carried something different. Every board displayed handwritten messages from neighbors expressing gratitude to veterans, first responders, teachers, nurses, and anyone whose quiet acts of service often went unnoticed. Children had painted colorful hearts. Older veterans wrote the names of friends they never forgot. Families left messages thanking loved ones who sacrificed for others. The fence had become more than wood. It had become a living wall of gratitude. Everett stood silently reading every message with tears filling his eyes. He later admitted he never imagined something broken could become more meaningful after being repaired. Those words settled deeply inside me. Because they weren't just about the fence. They were about people. Many of us carry broken places inside ourselves, convinced those cracks make us less valuable. Yet sometimes those very places become where compassion grows strongest. The people who have suffered often become the ones most capable of lifting others. Winter arrived gently that year. Snow dusted rooftops while smoke curled from chimneys across Birch Hollow Lane. One evening I stopped by Everett's house with hot soup after hearing he had caught a cold. He smiled as I entered. On the coffee table rested a small wooden box. Inside were military medals, faded photographs, and a folded handwritten letter. Everett told me he wanted me to keep the letter one day, not because it held valuable history, but because it contained the reminder that had finally changed his life. The letter read that courage isn't measured only on battlefields. Sometimes the greatest bravery is allowing yourself to accept kindness after believing for years that you don't deserve it. A few weeks later Everett passed away peacefully in his sleep. The neighborhood mourned together. Veterans from across the county attended his memorial. Mira stood beside me throughout the service. Neither of us cried because we wished he had lived forever. We cried because one ordinary act of helping repair a fence had introduced us to a remarkable human being whose quiet compassion continued changing lives long after the uniforms were folded away. Today, every spring, neighbors gather around that same fence. We replace weathered boards when necessary, repaint faded messages, and invite new families to add their own words of gratitude. Children who never met Everett now ask about the smiling veteran whose photograph hangs nearby. And every year his story is told again. Not because he was famous. Not because he sought recognition. But because he proved that even the smallest act of kindness can echo across generations in ways we may never fully understand. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, leave a comment about a person who changed your life through a simple act of compassion, and subscribe to Acts That Matter. Your support helps these meaningful stories reach people who may need hope today. Special request. Before you leave, please comment with the words, "Kindness lives on," if you believe even the smallest good deed can change someone's future. We'd love to read your thoughts and honor the everyday heroes among us. As I look at that weathered fence today, I no longer see old wood or repaired damage. I see proof that compassion often arrives quietly, without applause or headlines. One person notices another carrying a burden that feels too heavy. One pair of hands reaches out without expecting reward. One morning becomes a lifetime of changed hearts. We never know which ordinary moment will become the story someone tells years later when they need hope most. That's why kindness should never be delayed. A simple decision to help may become the very reason another person believes tomorrow is worth facing. And sometimes, the greatest legacy we leave behind isn't found in wealth, achievements, or recognition. It's found in the lives that become brighter simply because we chose to care when someone else needed it most.